Hey everyone, it's Braulio Rosa with the Broward Bar Buzz. Today I'm happy to have Louis Schiff, a retired Broward County judge, a baseball aficionado, and the author of this book, Attorneys in Baseball That Are in the Hall of Fame. I added to that. Welcome, Lou.
Thanks, Braulio. It's great to be here. Great to be here in this capacity as a retired judge and an author, and coming and talking to you about the book, Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Gosh, I'm thinking I've known you probably about 14 years, all as the bar exec and you being a judge.
As long as you've been here, sure.
Yeah.
If you've been here 14, 15 years, that's how long I've known you. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of CLE programs, things like that.
Tons of them.
Right.
Tons
Absolutely,
of them.
Yeah.
So you wrote this book, and in it you talk about 11 attorneys who have been inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Right.
Which attorney that was inducted, which one surprised you the most doing your research, their story?
I think when Bob Jarvis and I edited it together, Professor Jarvis from Nova Southeast, and this is our second book. We did one about 10, 12 years ago called Baseball and the Law. It's been used all over the country for law schools and teaching baseball law. Bob and I got together and we put this book together with the help of 8 other law professors and law librarians from all over the country. And we each took chapters. And so Bob and I did the first chapter on Kenesaw Mountain Landis, and I did the last chapter on Tony La Russa, and then the other authors all took a figure, that's an attorney that's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. So we start out talking about Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis. And most people know the story that in the 1920s there was the Black Sox scandal, and Braulio, you probably know the story about how there were men that bet on the game and they influenced the White Sox to throw the World Series when they were playing the Cincinnati Reds. And after it was over, baseball was at a crossroads. They had what was called the National Commission. And the National Commission was made up of some of the owners of the ball clubs, but they weren't very strong. They didn't have a lot of control over the players or the clubs. And so they went out and they said, we need to find someone that will take control of baseball. Well, they found that person in Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis. So what most people know about him is that he was the man who they called a czar, who took over baseball for the purpose of saying that when these men were found not guilty at their criminal trial, he still ruled that they're going to be banned for life. And the most famous of those would be Shoeless Joe Jackson. And there's some stories there that when you start digging, you will find that there's support, and some scholars have argued that of all the people that went to that were involved, Shoeless Joe Jackson was not literate, and he knew the least, perhaps, of anybody else, and was forced into doing things that he shouldn't have done because there was a conflict of interest between his attorney and the attorney for one of the teams. So, but that's another story for another day. So it's Kenesaw Mountain Landis that most people think of as this strong figure that put baseball back on its right track and righted the failing ship. And if that's what you know about him, that's really the tip of the iceberg. When Bob and I began to do the research regarding Kenesaw Mountain Landis, it uncovered a very complicated man, a man ethically challenged, a man that was discriminatory against blacks, a man who ruled with an iron fist and was considered a czar, and a man who thought of himself first before others. And so I'll give you some of the examples we came across as we were doing the research. He became a federal judge at age 39. Now, how do you become a federal judge at age 39? Most folks don't realize this. Well, he became a federal judge at age 39 in Illinois because he had, and he's from Indiana originally, he had 2 brothers who were congressmen from Indiana. They lobbied President Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt appoints attorney Landis to be a federal judge. There's a lot of politics going on in those days. In the book, we talk about some of the things he said, some of the hurtful things he said against the Irish community and the Italian-American community, and we have the quotes in the book about how he said these terrible things. And he rises to power and becomes this federal judge. And this is before he's commissioner. He rules on a few cases. One of the famous cases is a case involving a monopoly. And in that case, he finds that Standard Oil has committed a monopoly. He's a federal trial judge, and he awards millions of dollars for them, which eventually gets overturned on appeal. But he shows himself to be this thinking individual that's not afraid to make rulings. At the same time, he loves baseball. He goes to Cub games, he goes to White Sox games, and they're only played during the day. So if they're only played during the day and you're a judge and they played at that time 70 some odd games a year at home, you can do the math and you can realize that there are a lot of afternoons when the judge is probably not in the courthouse. He's ruling as a judge, and then this happens. This meaning the World Series is thrown. He gets hired. And most people expected him, when he got hired, to give up his federal judgeship. He doesn't give up his federal judgeship. He says, I can do both jobs. And federal judgeship is a job for life. He's being paid about $17,000 to be the czar, as he called himself, the commissioner of baseball. I'm sorry, he was $17,000 a year to be the federal judge. He gets paid $45,000 a year to be Major League Baseball's commissioner. People say, Kenesaw Mountain, you got a conflict. I don't have a conflict. I can do this job myself. Now he's getting paid twice for two jobs that require his undivided attention. He does this for a little while. At the annual meeting of the American Bar Association, he's censored. They censor him. They say he shouldn't be doing this. Now, up until this time, there are no codes of conduct governing judges. Up until this time, there's not a single code of conduct that governs judges. So he's like, I don't know how to do this. There's nothing wrong with me doing it. There's no rule against it. And the American Bar Association was having a hard time trying to pass these rules. One step further. Congress now starts looking at this, and they say, we are going to now investigate you and consider impeachment. So the judge said, impeachment? So I'll tell you what, I really don't need both jobs. I'm going to become the commissioner of baseball full-time. He resigns his position. And as a result of him resigning, the American Bar Association finally gets together and they pass the first code of judicial conduct. So a lot of times when I'll talk to lawyers and judges or just general public, I'll ask the question this way: does anybody know why we have a judicial code of conduct? And then I'll get quiet, people will raise their hands and they'll give answers. And unless they've heard me say this before, I go, no, baseball. The reason we have a judicial code of conduct goes back to Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis and baseball. So what else did we uncover about him? Well, we uncovered that during his term, and he served from 1922 until his death in 1944, we found that he had the ability to encourage the integration of baseball. And he didn't, because Jackie Robinson doesn't come along until a few years later, after he dies. So during his lifetime, he is blocking blacks from playing baseball. And it was a conspiracy with him and the other owners of the teams to stop them from playing, because the black leagues, the Negro leagues, were extremely successful. And where were the Negro League teams playing? Do you have any idea, Braulio? Take a guess.
At the Major League ballparks.
There you
on
go.
A different day.
That's exactly right. So you're a Major League Baseball owner, and you are having, there's your team, and then there's the other team, and if you start to integrate baseball, you're going to lose the revenue from the other team. So they made a financial, and I'm putting that in quotes, they made a financial decision not to integrate. Well, as a result of, later on, integration, the Negro Leagues comes to an end in 1954. And what's very surprising is that the team started to integrate right after Jackie Robinson, but you know the last team to integrate?
Wasn't it Boston?
It was. Do you know the year? And folks, I'm telling you now, I didn't give Braulio this. These are not softball questions. I didn't give him the answer.
It was late in the game.
It was.
It was later. It could have been, was it in the 60s?
It was. It was 1962.
Jeez.
A player by the name of Pumpsy Green was the last African-American ball player to make sure that a ball team was integrated, and that was the Boston Red Sox.
Wow.
So
I mean, it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long. It was in my lifetime. And in 2020, so the Most Valuable Player Award, which is given out every year to the most valuable player in the American League and the National League, used to have his name on it. In 2020, they took his name off that award.
Really? Why?
Because of his stance on refusing to integrate the things that he did.
Yeah.
So they said, you know what? We're not going to do this. It's going to be just the Most Valuable Player Award.
So interesting, and this is just, wasn't going here, but here we are. During that time, 0 blacks until they start to integrate in the 50s, and I guess in Boston, the 60s.
It was the 40s, yeah, the 40s, right after World War II.
Do you happen to know the percentage now of black ball players in baseball?
About 18%. It's down considerably over the years. I think it's about 18%.
Wow. Okay.
But don't quote me. I could be wrong.
Yeah. I was just curious. In your research of all of these attorney baseball players, La Russa comes up, right? And
Right.
he's the guy you ended up writing on. What do you think? How do you think law school helped him or hindered him in his career as a manager?
If it wasn't for law school, he probably would never have been a manager, and he wouldn't have been the successful manager he is. So I smile and I tell you this because I wanted to do the story about Tony La Russa because he is the only living attorney that's in the Hall of Fame, and he graduated from Florida State University. He grew up in Tampa. He went to University of South Florida over in Tampa. He was a star athlete in high school, and I wanted to be able to talk to him, and I knew, and I know many of the people that know him. So, and rather than, of course, I read stories about him. He has about 3 or 4 published books. I bought all of his books. I read everything there was to know about him. I went on Ancestry.com. I went to newspapers.com. This is the way we researched the book. But what I was able to do is I was able to talk to people about him. And so that really gave me an idea. And he was so kind and generous of his time to me. First phone call I made to him, picks up the phone. We have a mutual friend. He picks up the phone. And it sounds like he's at a baseball game. And he was. It was spring training. And he goes, hello? I go, Mr. La Russa? He goes, well, who's this? And I tell him who I am. This is Louis Schiff. So-and-so is a mutual friend. He goes, oh, call me Tony. And it's like, wow, call you Tony? What a nice guy! And we spent. And he was in the box in Arizona for the Chicago White Sox. It was the 7th inning, and then during the 7th inning, if you follow baseball in spring training, this is when there's a lot of wholesale changes. Ball players are coming in that may not make the team, but he's there really writing reports so he can give it to the owner of the team, Reinsdorf. So we had a nice conversation then. We had several other conversations where he was very sharing of his life with me. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk to him about was how law school helped him. And he told me that law school helped him for critical thinking. Law school helped him to become a better manager. He said to me that he was an extremely competitive law student, and I don't mean cutthroat law student, a competitive law student that was competing basically against himself for good grades. And I spoke to one of his good law school friends. Scott Tosian is in the book. Scott shared with me stories about Tony in law school. I was able to talk to Professor Earhart from FSU, who Tony described as his favorite law school professor, and Professor Earhart has described as one of his favorite students of all time. And so I learned that while Tony was so the story on, he didn't get into the Hall of Fame because of his playing ability. He got into baseball. It was 1963 that he was a bonus baby. He was what they called a bonus baby. Now, a bonus baby is an athlete that's so superior to others that when a bonus baby is signed in, there was no draft back in 1962, they had to stay with the major league team the whole year. It's kind of like a Rule 5 draft player now. Hicks on the Marlins is a Rule 5 player. It means that they sign you, they take you from another team through a Rule 5 draft. You have to stay with that team, and if you don't, you go back to the original team, and then that team that took you has to give money to the other team. Well, in Tony's case, he had to be with the A's, Kansas City A's, the entire season. His mom and dad believed that education was more important. And even though he signed the day he graduated high school, his mother insisted on the Kansas City A's, Finley, providing him with a college scholarship. And so they left money so he could go to school, and he went to the University of South Florida. But it was his mom and dad. His mom and dad met when they were working in a cigar factory in Tampa. That's how they met. Old family in Tampa. That's how they met. Mom and dad. That's how his mom and dad met.
La Russa, Italian,
right.
not Hispanic.
Well, no. Part of the family is Spanish as well, and so the family came together. He was always told education. You have to get an education. You have to get an education. Whatever you do in life, get education. He hurt himself as an athlete. And that's when he saw the tea leaves. And he realized, I'm not going to be a ball player my whole life. So I need to do something. And so he was encouraged to go to law school. He spoke to certain people. He was encouraged to go to law school. He went to law school, and that's where he met Professor Earhart. While he met Professor Earhart, the conversation between Professor Earhart and him was, you got to have a fallback position, Tony. You really got to do well in law school, because once baseball is over, you have to do something. And Tony wanted to be a trial lawyer. And so he does very well in law school. And he chose Florida State University. People say, well, why did he go to Florida State? He was accepted by all the other schools at the time, which would have been Stetson and Florida and University of Miami. I guess those were the schools in the state at the time. Florida State was the only school that would allow him to take off for the baseball season. So he was going to school, and that's when the state of Florida used the quarter system. So he went to school for 2 quarters, took 2 quarters off. It took him 5, almost 6 years to finish law school. But he did it on the quarter system. And while he was playing ball, he realized that he wasn't going to make it as a ball player. And that's when he got hired by Bill Veeck, Hall of Fame athlete, Hall of Fame owner Bill Veeck. And Bill hired him, and I'm friends with his son Mike, which is another very good connection. And so I reached out to Michael, and I said, I want to talk to you about Tony La Russa. Can we do this? I told him what I was doing, and sure. And so there was a story out there which is not true. The story out there was that the reason why Bill Veeck hired Tony La Russa was because Bill Veeck got him for a little bit of money, because he was an inexperienced manager. Bill Veeck hired him because of his law degree. According to Mike, he said, my father thought he was so intelligent. And it was Bill Veeck that made him finish law school and take the bar exam. And when he found out that he passed the bar exam, Bill Veeck arranged for one of the local federal judges, Abraham Lincoln Moravitz, a federal judge in Chicago, to swear him in the day he found out he passed the bar. And there's a great cite in the book to an interview that Tony does with the great Harry Carey, and there's the cite to the video clip where he's talking to Harry Carey before the game after he got sworn in as a member of the bar, and Harry says to him, well, we're here to congratulate Tony. He just graduated law school today. Tony didn't flinch. He didn't correct him, probably being polite. Maybe he didn't hear the question, but he talked about his fondness for the law and why he became an attorney. And Tony said that is the reason why. And he's also a gifted man. What he's done in his lifetime, and he's had some bumps and bruises, and we discussed the bumps and bruises in the book, but the positive things, he's been a mentor to law students. And as an example, I met a judge when I was on the faculty for the Florida Judicial College. A judge comes up to me from Tampa by the name of Robin Fusen. Robin says, I hear you like baseball. I go, I do. He goes, I played in the A's organization. I go, no. He was a pitcher all the way up to AAA. So they have a circuit judge over in Hillsborough County that was a AAA pitcher for the Buffalo Bisons. And then he joined the staff when Tony was the manager for Oakland. And it was Tony that convinced Robin. Robin came to him. Robin was thinking of going to Stetson. And it was Tony that came to Robin to say, hey, we're talking about school. And Tony said, if you have a chance to go to law school, Robin, you need to go. Cover your bases. Go. And Robin did, and he was a successful defense attorney, and he's a judge over in Hillsborough County. And today Tony is not so active. He retired a few years ago as a manager, but he's still listed as a special advisor to the White Sox, and he's there several times during the season. So he's an incredible man. Question always comes, well, what kind of lawyer was he? Well, he never practiced law, but he was with a law firm over in Tampa. Bill Dooley, who I also spoke to, was Tony's boss for a while. He was a member of the firm. He never practiced law. Tony was about to try a guardianship competency case, and he got called in to spring training, so he never tried it. But one of his legacies in law is the little when you're on X, the Twitter bird thing with the check mark. It's because of Tony that you have that, because somebody had represented themselves falsely as Tony on Twitter, and he went after Twitter at the time, and it was in 2009, and that's when they changed it so they can have proof that this is the person that really is. So that's his legal contribution to the legal world, that people now, if they're online and they see that little check mark, they know that really is that person.
Legal. So there are a bunch of unwritten rules. I mean, even in Little League, I remember playing, there were like these little rules that weren't rules in baseball. And there's some unwritten rules in the law, even though there's a lot of law. What parallels are there between the two, and how judges and lawyers may approach a practice of law?
Civility towards others, shaking the hand of your opponent when they beat you. You don't see that very often anymore. Somebody, you're at a trial and it's over. Lawyers going out for coffee after a hearing. Lawyers getting to know a little bit about their family instead of putting up boxing gloves. It's like, well, Braulio, tell me about the wife and the kids. Tell me, find out about them. I had a case years ago. The attorney that I was against was a guy by the name of John Marinelli. He practiced in Lighthouse Point. We had a knockdown, drag-out divorce case called Childers versus Childers. It wound up getting appealed up to the fourth. Some of it went my favor, some of it went his favor. It's still good law about division of assets. But he used to always say to me, and he was a little bit older than me, he used to say, extol your adversaries. Extol your adversaries. And I think we forget sometimes as lawyers that the person that's appearing opposite us today may very well be on our same team later. And you don't have to talk nasty about that person. And we see it in pleadings. Lawyers put things in pleadings that don't belong there. Keep the dramatics out. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but there are some lawyers that love to put a zinger in about their adversary. Keep that part out. I have said this many times, if you truly believe that your adversary has done something so heinous, then you have a duty and an obligation to report it to the Florida bar. That you do. You have that duty.
Right.
If you believe that they have done something just so terrible, but some of the wording in pleadings and motions don't have any business being there. And so baseball is a lot like that too. A guy hits a home run off you, and you're the pitcher. A lot of times it used to be you'd throw at the guy's head. Bob Gibson was famous for doing that. I get it. But it's still a game where that person you just threw out may be on your team the next day, and there's other ways to do certain things. We've seen a reform in some of the rules of court that clarify right now the steps and the responsibilities that the lawyers have to each other and to the court, and they've kind of taken away the discretion from the Florida judges, that these are the ground rules. Well, baseball is doing that too. Instead of having the umpires have so much discretion, now there's reviews you can ask for, so you don't have to yell and scream at an umpire. And yesterday, Major League Baseball approved the ball strike challenge, and I've seen it. Been to many minor league games, and I've seen it in use. And a player, it'll be either the batter or the pitcher or the catcher, can contest whether it was a ball or a strike, and you'll have two such challenges in a game. So you have to be judicious with your challenges, because if you use them up in the first inning, your teammates are going to get upset with you if you use them for your own self-purpose as opposed to the purpose of the team. So you'll see next year there'll be some gamemanship. When are you going to ask? And all you have to do is tap your helmet or tap your head, or in the catcher's sake, the catcher will just simply tell the umpire. And then they'll put it up on you'll put it up on the scoreboard, and you'll see exactly where the ball is. And if it's upheld, you keep your challenge, and if it's not upheld, you lose one of your two challenges.
I've always found that, so subjective strikes. There was a time, and this is like off script, but I remember watching Atlanta. I was not a Brave fan being born and raised in LA. We were Dodger fans back in the day, and but there was a time where Atlanta, and I haven't watched lately, was like that was the team. They were the team, and it seemed like, and they had a great pitching staff, if you recall that era.
Yes, they did.
And it seemed like if it was even close, they got the strike called. It's near, and it's like. It's a little subjective, growing up Little League, it was always like, it's got to be knee high, over the plate somewhere.
It's people, for about 10 years, I was a high school basketball referee at night in Broward and in Palm Beach County.
You're like Billy Crystal in the movie.
No. and what we try to do, umpires and referees, we're not perfect. As a judge, I would say, look, I'm not perfect. I'm going to make a mistake. If you feel I've made a mistake, there's an appropriate remedy. But when we're talking about kids, nobody's perfect. There's not going to be automatic instant replays at certain levels.
Yeah.
And folks have to accept the finality of a ruling and respect it. Because the officials, whether it's a judge, an umpire, a referee, they're trying to do their best. Yeah. And I can assure you that I've never met a judge that wanted to go into court and mess things up. I've never met a referee that said, I'm going to go on the basketball court and I'm going to really mess things up tonight. And so a lot of times as a referee, you can be assigned to the level of the games that you're comfortable with. And that's true as a judge, too. We know that in order to handle a capital crime case in the state of Florida, you have to go through a certain program in order to handle a capital crime. So we have certain training for judges. We have the same training for lawyers. When a lawyer becomes a lawyer, you have a certain amount of months to take the introduction to the bar, and we hope by the time that you become a lawyer that you understand civility and niceness. And there's a difference between civility and trying to stab somebody in the back. There's just a big difference, and you can lose with honor, and you can be respectful. And I think that's something that we all have to tone it down. Just tone down the volume a little bit, just a little. If your mother or your father or whoever, your best friend, your grandmother, your favorite aunt was sitting in court with you and watching you, how would you behave?
Great message for today.
Yeah.
If you could pick any past or present attorney Hall of Famer to go to a ballpark and eat a hot dog or whatever, who would it be? What would you ask him? And what ballpark would you choose? And I give you current ballparks or even ballparks of the past.
I would choose Branch Rickey, and we'd go to Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, where I was born in 1955. That was the year that the Brooklyn Dodgers won the World Series. It wasn't because I was born. I was only about 4 months old. But I would want to talk to him at Ebbets Field because that's where the color barrier was broken. And in order to understand Branch Rickey, you have to understand his upbringing as a person. And so we have 11 different men that are attorneys in the Hall of Fame. Some of them were raised with very wealthy families, and others were raised on the seat of poorness. And Branch Rickey was an intelligent young man who went to the University of Michigan, and to make ends meet, he needed to coach basketball and he needed to coach baseball, and he was the coach of Ohio Wesleyan University. And he had a black on his team, a black ball player on his team. And At that time, that was unheard of. And there were times, and we talk about it in the book, it's not my story, it's another author's story, but there's times where at one point they went down to play the University of Kentucky, and the University of Kentucky told Branch Rickey, we're not playing your college team. So Branch Rickey said, well, if this ball player can't play, then we're going home. You're not going to play us. And they consented. And there was another time where in the room, he came back into the room one day because this ball player was staying with him because the hotel they were staying at wouldn't allow him to stay at that hotel merely because of the color of his skin. Outrageous. But Branch Rickey said, we're going to get you in the room. He's in the room, and the ball player's in there crying because of the color of his skin. And then we tell the story in the book about how Branch Rickey made a commitment to himself that if he ever had the opportunity to do something like this for baseball, he would do it. And he did. And so that's the guy I'd want to sit down and talk to, because not every person in the Baseball Hall of Fame is Branch Rickey. That's an attorney.
We need more Branch Rickeys.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Clemente for me, we talked about it.
We talked about that before we went on, yeah. Roberto Clemente was yours, who, if the audience doesn't know, risked his life and died after an earthquake. And unfortunately, the jet he was on was overloaded, and it crashed. They were going to Managua, Nicaragua, to bring aid. And Clemente was from Puerto Rico, but he felt such a strong tie to assist right after the baseball season. It was shortly after he had his 3,000th hit that he goes, we're going to do this.
And talking about that, well, we'll come back to that. What do you want your audience, whether it's lawyers or non-lawyers, to take away from this book?
If you're a baseball fan, and I talked about it about Branch Rickey, you only know like this much. You know the story about him doing certain things. If you're a baseball fan, it kind of tells you who the person is. We pull back the curtain and we say, this is who the person is. This is how law influenced their life. A guy like John Montgomery Ward from the 1800s, 1900s, got in because he was a great ball player, but he also represented baseball teams, and he formed the first players union. And the things that he did, if he wasn't traded, there's a story that he gets traded from the Providence Grays to the New York Gothams, and that time the Gothams were soon to be the Giants. There's nothing that he could do about it. There's just nothing he can do about it. He either has to play baseball in Providence or never play baseball again. So he decides, all right, I got to go to New York. He goes to New York, and he decides to go to Columbia Law School. He goes to Columbia Law School, and then he realizes with all this knowledge he has, he could then try to form players' unions and do things for players. Go back to Branch Rickey for a minute. One thing Branch Rickey did, he formed the minor league system as we know it today. A long time ago, all the minor leagues were independent. So if I owned a team in the major leagues and Braulio, you owned a minor league team, if I saw somebody on your team that I wanted, I would call you up and go, hey, how much, I'll pay you X amount of dollars, you give me his contract. Great. Branch Rickey, the lawyer, the attorney, remembers, why do I need minor leagues? I remember my business law classes. I passed the bar. And by the way, Branch Rickey, although he went to the University of Michigan, practiced law just for a brief time in Idaho because he had some buddies there. And that's why they went. So he designs the farm system as like a conglomerate. I'm going to own a team here, a team here, a team here, a team here. So now I don't have to pay anybody to get another ball player. I own these teams. In essence, I own the ball players. And now I'm making money from all these other minor league teams. And so he was the inventor, as a result of his legal education, of the baseball that we know it today in the farm system.
Okay, now just a fun question. If you could go back in time, similar to the other one, but this is fun, and pick a great baseball moment, any moment, doesn't have to be a lawyer, just a great baseball moment, like Clemente's 3,000 hit.
Right.
Where would you go?
That's easy.
Where would you go for you?
So for my friends will know it. It'd be game 5 of the 1969 World Series between the Mets and the Orioles. I was all of 14 years old.
Did Mets, was it Seaver who was the pitcher?
Jerry Koosman was the winning pitcher.
Oh, okay.
Jerry Koosman, who was my favorite pitcher as a kid. Ed Kranepool was my favorite ball player as a kid, who I got to know later on in life. Ed passed away a couple of years ago. And Don Clendenin on that team became an attorney. He's not in the Hall of Fame, but in the back of the book, in the appendix of attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame, we have a listing of lawyers, attorneys, Mo Berg, Don Clendenin, and others that were lawyers. Then Don Clendenin went after he finished his playing days, but he became a lawyer and went to South Dakota to practice law. But I'd want to go to Game 5 of the 1969 World Series. I didn't get to go to the World Series in 1969. I was, stupid things. I could tell you exactly where I was on certain dates. It was October 16th, 1969. I was on a bus. It was a Thursday. You can look this up. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon, and I used to go bowling in a bowling league. It was a school bowling league. And me and my buddies are on the bus, and I have the transistor radio, and we're listening to them win the World Series on the bus going to a bowling alley. I'd trade the bowling alley for the ballpark.
You would. This was good.
It's fun.
This was really good. You are a wealth of knowledge. I didn't realize how much history you know about baseball. This is the first time we really just sat down and kind of, it's like breaking bread and talking or having a beer and having discussion. This was great. I recommend anyone read this book.
Thank you.
Learn more. Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yep.
So where do you get this book?
You can get it from our publisher, McFarland Company. You can get it on Amazon, next day delivery, Barnes and Nobles, pretty much where books are sold. Just go in, tell them you want the book. They can order it for you if you want it the next day. I know that Amazon has it the next day.
Wonderful. Lou, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Pleasure.